Okay, good morning. This is Richard Hsu, host of Hsu Untied. This morning, I'm very thrilled and pleased to have with me as my guest David Elihu, who's a partner at Quinn Emanuel. David, welcome to the program.
Richard, good morning. Thanks for having me.
So, David, you have one of the more unusual backgrounds I come across with lawyers, and starting with your degree in engineering from MIT. Tell me a little bit about why you chose that degree and why you chose to go to MIT to begin with.
You know, I grew up in high school. I was sciencey, mathy. I think that was my strong subject. But I also there was this organization in high school called Junior Statesman where we did debate and things like that. I was student body president, and so always had an eclectic interest, whether I was going to become a doctor or an engineer or go into finance. So I really didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew that I loved science and
Hmm.
I wanted to continue to do that. And
Hmm.
at the time, I think still probably MIT is considered probably the top science engineering school in the world. Maybe I think you probably differ with that, or whether it's Caltech, right? But and so I went there, and I was very interested in chemical engineering because I think chemical engineering at the time and still was very cross-disciplinary. So you have people who approach that from an oil and refinery standpoint, and we had a lot of grads in that department who would went and worked at oil companies, right? We had a lot of people who did that and worked at biotech companies. And so the way I got into that was, and I also saw that a lot of attorneys were chemical engineers, and I was kind of tracking the career track of people who were coming out of that department at MIT, and they also went into medicine. So I thought, look, this is a very versatile engineering discipline, but on top of that, I think U.S. News at the time used to publish what the annual salary of graduates by major across the United States was, and I think chemical engineering was the top.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
yeah, and so I did that, and I turned out I decided I wanted to be a lawyer, and that was actually a perfect fit for me. And I got a master's degree at MIT in biomedical engineering as well,
Oh.
which kind of veered me less away from the oil and gas and more towards what I'm doing now. Typically at Quinn Emanuel. So that's kind of how I got into that.
Well, I mean, you said you were tracking law. What made you decide to actually go in that direction? Did you talk to somebody?
I was very interested. Yeah, I would talk to people. I was very interested in patents and intellectual property.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I remember I took a course at MIT about patents and intellectual property. I was still an undergrad, but they offered that.
Mm.
And that was kind of what got me to law. I love to debate. I love to talk. I wanted something that was stable, and it's interesting because you see a lot of people see medicine as a source of stability, but I thought that if I could pursue a career where I could take my interest in science and engineering, but apply it somewhere else, I think that was going to be exciting for me. And I think that I chose, I'm very happy. I love what I do.
Yeah.
I know us lawyers, not everybody loves what they do, but I love what I do. And I think it's my ability to continue to engage every new case is a new science venture.
Interesting. So when you got the master's degree, were you thinking of law school already at the time, or you were still thinking the engineering track at that point?
Um, if I remember correctly, about I started the grad school while I was still an undergrad.
I
So
see.
the program was typically a 2-year program, or 1.5-year program. I did it in 1 year. Um, and right around that time when I was about to start, I already started to think about
Mm.
it. And I think it's not necessarily natural, right? I think Richard, you raised a good point that it's not necessarily natural for somebody who's using a pipette in a lab, where all your colleagues are applying to get PhDs and go become professors or work at Pfizer or what have you, to say, look, I'm going to do something completely different.
Totally.
Um,
Well, how did you, when you made the plunge and decided to go to law school, what did you think of it first? I mean, it's very different from being a scientist.
Totally different.
Yeah.
Um, I think that MIT is obviously an excellent school, and you do a lot of writing, but it wasn't as much writing. So I think the way that what you do on a daily basis in law school and as a lawyer is very different than what you do as an engineering or in a
Yeah.
lab, right? Whether
Yeah.
it's maintaining lab notebooks and doing experiments, that's very different than everything. So that was the first thing that was surprising. And obviously, I think becoming a lawyer and in law school, I think the other thing that was really fascinating was just the different backgrounds that
Right.
people go to music school and become lawyers. People, study art history and become lawyers. And I guess study engineering and become lawyers as well, right? So
Yeah. Interesting. But you took to, I mean, you like law school. I mean, you liked it. I mean, or what did it
I
take you
think
a while to
I
adjust
liked
to it?
it. I think I liked it. You know, I
Yeah.
had been in Boston for a while, right? But when I started law school, I'd already been in Cambridge for 5 years, and continued there at Harvard for 3 more years. So I think it was kind of still home a little bit. So the same places I was going to as an undergrad and grad school, it wasn't totally new to me, and obviously intellectually it was fascinating.
Now you mentioned you were interested in litigation. Did you ever try corporate or transactional, or you were litigation all the way?
If I remember now, I spent a summer, my first summer at Sidley Austin,
Uh-huh.
um, during law school. It was my 1L year, I think. Yeah, that's right. And I remember sitting in on some deals.
Uh-huh.
Partners would call the summer associates to come listen in on deal
Yeah.
terms, and that to me was just something that I never got attracted to. I think it's very interesting because when I was in law school, at Harvard, taking corporations and all these other things. I was totally interested in finance and business and things like that. And there was this attraction to becoming a deal lawyer and taking my skills and doing that. And there's lots of lawyers that have, science backgrounds that become transactional, but that to me never was interesting.
Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting. So now how has your practice evolved? Are you purely in patents and intellectual property, or is your litigation practice much broader?
It's actually much, much broader, and I would say it's evolved over time. I think when I started, I spent about a year and a half at Ropes and Gray, the former Fish and Need Group in New York,
Oh yeah.
and then I came to Quinn's New York office and now LA. And I started out probably doing about 80% or more patent litigation,
Hmm.
almost entirely, and that's kind of changed now. I would say that I do a lot of life sciences biotech, so probably well over half my practice has some angle to that. We do a lot of intellectual property disputes for trade secret cases,
Mm.
employee mobility, things like that. We do a lot of my cases over the last few years have been drug development disputes, so pharma versus pharma over whether one side developed a drug properly or a license agreement, and things like that. So everything, or almost everything I do, maybe 2/3 has a life sciences angle to it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then I also do general litigation, but I really like the life sciences work that I do, and
Well,
obviously patents is part of that.
yeah, right. So do you find that your chemical engineering background actually comes in handy? Do you actually feel like you get to rely on that somewhat? Does it give you somewhat of an edge, maybe?
Yeah, for sure. I think so. Certainly that combined with my biomedical engineering master's, absolutely critical. I think that we have a profession which is very inclusive in terms of who could work on certain types of cases. Certainly in my firm, right? I think we have IP at Quinn Emanuel. We have IP litigators. A lot of the people that work on IP cases don't have technical backgrounds, right? And we're very inviting of that. And if
Right.
you feel like you're ambitious and want to learn, we invite you to do that. But even there, I think my background has helped me. I'm able to, because I know from my training and working in the lab before, the equipment, the scientific principles, the biology, and things like that. I think absolutely it still helps.
Yeah.
Probably over time, as I get older, it's gonna help less and less. It's gonna be my experience that's probably more relevant. But I think even today, I still, there are issues that come up probably in every case that somehow relates to something I learned in undergrad and grad school at MIT.
Yeah. Well, you've obviously had a very successful career in private practice. Have you ever thought about trying in-house or going to the other side, as they say? Has that ever crossed your mind?
You know what? I have not. I think that in-house lawyers are have very big benefits. I think lifestyle benefits. I think that you're more in a business environment, which obviously has great. I think in terms of people interactions is really really interesting. But
Yeah.
I like trying cases. I like litigating cases. I like working for different types of clients. And so for me, oddly enough, I think I'm in a perfect place, and I'm
Yeah.
very happy that I'm able to represent different companies on their most important disputes.
Yeah. And it sounds like you were very pleased with your major and your academic course of study. Like you don't regret going into something more directly related to law or anything like that.
I think I'm very happy. I think it was probably one of the best decisions I ever made was
Yeah.
going to MIT. I think
Yeah.
it's interesting because I think that maybe the biggest benefit of getting an engineering degree, and this is probably understated, Richard, is that MIT is a tough place, just like Caltech was a tough place, right?
Yeah.
So if anything, I think the work ethic and the push that they give you as an undergrad at MIT in engineering is probably the closest thing that I had to being in trial as a litigator.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That is the closest analog, right? It is the engineering courses, which are very tough, and you're staying up late, and solving the problem sets and things like that. That's the closest analog you're going to get, I think, and at least for me, it has been. So I think that they sometimes joke that going to MIT was like drinking water from a fire hose, and I think that is probably the thing that has helped me be a hard driving litigator, probably more than anything that I experienced in law school, or even as a junior associate working on discovery or things like that.
Well, David, this has been a fascinating conversation. I really appreciate your taking the time. As a former engineer myself, I love chatting with people and hearing their similar stories. So congratulations on all your success.
Thank you so much, Richard. It's been a pleasure.
This is Richard Hsu, David Elihu. Thanks.